You're listening to The Jake Asman Show on the SportsMap Radio Network.
Presented by Rocket Mortgage.
Live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Jake Asman.
Our next guest is one of the best NBA reporters in the business. He covers the NBA for ESPN. He is Tim MacMahon, and he joins us right now on our progressive guest line. Tim, appreciate the time. I know how busy you are, so thanks so much for coming on the show for a few minutes here.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start with what you wrote about the Dallas Mavericks and Kristaps Porzingis for ESPN yesterday. Obviously, in your piece, you talked about how Porzingis is not thrilled with his role. You know, he doesn't feel like a co-star on the team, according to your sources. Is this a situation that can be fixed, or is this a situation, as we've seen with a lot of, stars in the NBA, it could get ugly and lead to KP wanting out?
I'll be honest with you. This is obviously gut feeling and not reporting, but I would be surprised if this ends up being a marriage that lasts long term. I would be surprised. I don't know exactly how it's resolved, but KP's got 3 years left on his contract, which certainly makes complicates things in terms of if they were to look to trade him. But I would be surprised if he finished that deal in Dallas. But we will see. I will say to KP's credit, he has been professional, especially throughout this playoff series when he was essentially turned into a spot-up shooter. Yesterday in his exit interviews, he talked about how his game has to evolve, how, he needs to really work this summer, and he's excited about actually having a healthy off season, which is something he hasn't had much in his career. But again, I just, I don't know that this is something that's going to be a long-term fit.
Tim, you mentioned his contract. I mean, compared to other, contracts around the NBA, just how difficult would it be to move a contract like KP's?
Yeah, and you know what? If there wasn't the durability issues, I don't know that it would be that difficult. But you're talking about a guy who's had 2 knee surgeries, who has, this is actually the first time in his career that he has finished a season healthy and available. He's going to miss, a dozen plus games, and only a dozen plus games if you're lucky per season. So that really makes things tough. And then, this year, he was clearly diminished athletically. The mobility was drastically reduced as he was coming off of the surgery to repair the meniscus in his right knee. And so when you're looking at $100+ million due to a guy for 3 years, and you have those kind of physical concerns, that's tough.
Do you think the issue with Porzingis is maybe not being used properly by the coaching staff, or is he just not really a good fit playing next to a guy like Luka Doncic?
You know what? I do think their games can be very complementary, but Porzingis it's not. He's not the co-star. He is a distant second fiddle on this team, and that's simply a talent thing. But, when they are able to run pick and roll, pick and pop, as I mentioned in that story, it's not just extremely effective. It was the most effective duo in the league in terms of high volume pick and roll. The problem is you can take that away from them. Mavericks did if you can go small and switch, because the Mavericks aren't going to post up Porzingis. He's not a good post up player. Are you 7'3"? Get down there. The problem is he's 7'3" and skinny, so guys shove him out to 17, 18 feet, and then really all he has is that face up jump shot, and it's just not efficient, effective basketball. And so at that point he becomes a spot up shooter. They would like him to cut more. And I'll be honest with you, so some of this is that Luka is young in his career. Obviously he's got a lot of professional experience, but he's still a 22-year-old superstar, and he does not go out of his way to make sure that Porzingis is feeling involved. He doesn't go out of his way to make sure that he's getting touches. I think a lot of times the lack of touches saps Porzingis' energy on the defensive end, and then that's a problem I think for both him and for Luka. And so there are some of the kind of the typical NBA tension between co-stars or franchise cornerstones that you see sometimes in these situations. Those often are manageable, but I just think there's a lot of things going on here that really kind of make this a difficult situation.
Very interesting. We're talking with Tim MacMahon. He covers the NBA for ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter at ESPN_MacMahon. Tim, as far as other stars around the league, I mean, we're getting close to the offseason. Obviously, we still have the whole playoffs to wrap up here in the second round. But we've seen this now where it just takes, a star to say they want out. They get all disgruntled and, they end up, getting traded and a lot of times go to the team they want to go to, as we've seen, most recently, of course, with James Harden. If you had to guess, not reporting, but maybe just kind of looking ahead, do you see a busy offseason? Do you see maybe a Dame Lillard or, Bradley Beal asking out and trying to go somewhere else?
I thought you were going to ask me about Porzingis. I was going to say, well, he's not in that kind of position at this point. Obviously, those are the two guys you mentioned. The Dame situation is the one I think that obviously pretty much every team in the league is monitoring, with them making a coaching change, with Dame clearly, trying to not just have influence, but he's trying to take control. And then, Neil Olshey, the Blazers GM, coming out and basically defending the roster that he's put together. I don't think that's the way, I would advise him to go into this because, look, the roster has not been good enough. I mean, the reason the Blazers didn't get out of the first round, you can't just pin that on Terry Stotts, say we're changing coaches, everything's fixed. That has been a flawed roster. Damian Lillard has acknowledged that. And so if your plan is just, hey, we'll hire a coach and run it back, Damian Lillard wants to be loyal. But I feel like he's reaching a point where it's kind of like Kevin Garnett in Minnesota. You want to be loyal, but loyalty at the expense of not having a legitimate chance to win a championship is a tough thing to swallow for a guy who is, legitimately an MVP caliber player on a year-in, year-out basis.
Tim, what changes could be coming to Milwaukee if they continue to get basically their doors blown off by Brooklyn in the series?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Bud's job is in jeopardy. That's no secret. That's reported by multiple outlets. And if they don't get out of this round, I do think there will probably be a coaching change. Roster wise, I don't know. They obviously were aggressive in upgrading their roster last off season, and you only have so many chips, and they really they pushed most of them in to go get Drew Holiday. The good news for Milwaukee is by doing that, Holiday were able to get Giannis to commit to his extension. So, I mean, could you imagine just how much people would be freaking out right now if if Giannis was about to enter free agency? So, they were able to avoid that situation. But again, I don't know how much flexibility they're going to have with the roster unless, look, if you put Middleton on the trade block, just hypothetically, you could definitely change some things. I don't know, though, that you're necessarily going to get better because of that. Sometimes, with a roster like that, sometimes drastic change isn't necessarily the best thing. Sometimes you got to stay the course roster-wise. I think especially if they're going to make a coaching change and see if that can help them get over the hump.
Tim MacMahon from ESPN with us here. Finally, Tim, point blank, is any team stopping the Nets right now? They look unstoppable, and they're doing it, of course, without James Harden.
Yeah, I think that it's safe to say that the Nets are the clear-cut favorites. I mean, as you mentioned, without James Harden, but Kevin Durant he's coming back off a killer. No, Kevin Durant is in all-time great status. He is absolutely phenomenal. Kyrie Irving, looks like the dude who hit the shot to help win a championship for the Cavaliers. They've put in some nice pieces around those guys. Blake Griffin's playing really well. Bruce Brown, what a find he's been. Joe Harris is a great fit. I just think they have so much firepower that it is tough for me to see anybody, knocking off the Nets. And if you made me say who's going to win the championship, I would ride with Brooklyn right now for sure.
Totally agree. He's Tim MacMahon. Once again, you can follow him on Twitter at ESPN_MacMahon. He covers the NBA and does a great job doing just that for ESPN. Tim, thanks so much for a few minutes. I know you got to run. Appreciate your time this morning, and hopefully I'll see you again soon. I know obviously this past year with the pandemic, I wasn't at too many Rockets games, but you've always been great, and thanks so much for coming on the show.
Okay, appreciate it.
Tim MacMahon with us there on our Progressive guest line. Drivers who save with Progressive save over $750 on average. Budenholzer's got to be the guy that takes the fall in Milwaukee. I mean, you can't fire all the players, and usually it's the coach that ends up being the big change. I think that's obvious. And then, teams monitoring the Damian Lillard situation, including the Knicks, who, by the way, according to Bet Online, are the favorites to land Dame Lillard if he's traded, for whatever that's worth. We shall see how that situation plays out going forward this offseason. But good stuff there with Tim MacMahon on our Progressive guest line. Quick break, and we wrap up our show for a Tuesday. This is indeed the Jake Asman Show, and you're listening to us on Sports Map Radio.
Wake up call. They still make